And combined with the substitute on that Landorus Incarnate as well, means it's really not a great matchup for Amoonguss, so definitely well prepared for this matchup as we get into round 4 of the Utrecht special event. It is Yoel versus Joan, and it's Porygon 2 Amoonguss versus the Landorus Incarnate and that Incineroar.
Speaking of Pokemon that like Trick Room, these are two slow and steady choices on Yoel's side of the field. Amoonguss and the Porygon 2 would not be surprised at all to see a potential Trick Room coming out here.
Not at all. It definitely seems to be the play at the moment. And interestingly, the Amoonguss is actually brought here despite what we're saying about how there's so many Pokemon actually that Joan has that is kind of immune to that Spore. But it does be able to keep the Porygon 2 safe, at least on this turn, with a Rage Powder, because there's no safety goggles on Joan's end.
Exactly. There's going to be the cheeky substitute set up early doors, however, for Yuan, knowing maybe there's nothing I could do to stop this opposing Trick Room from going off. Gonna have to just accept it and now set up a little bit of a defensive wall. The Incineroar is going to go for the parting shot, however, just lower some of the offensive pressure that the Porygon 2 is able to deal out with something like those Terra Blasts or the Ice Beams in the future as well, considering that there is a Landorus on the field. Yes, it is behind its substitute, but it still doesn't want to take any of those Ice Beams at all.
No, it doesn't. So yeah, it's a really nice play to keep everything safe. So if the Trick Room does go up, that Landorus can still target things very safely going into the future turns as Oakman Halflame comes in.
Yes, it dives into the battle as the Ice Beam connects into the substitute on Landorus. That will be more than enough to be able to break it down, and we can see Landorus come front and center once again, exposing itself to something like a Spore coming through from this Amoonguss. However, it was targeted into that Ogerpon slot. A great adjustment here from Yuan.
Yeah, Joan plays absolutely amazingly in that turn. Yeah, completely kind of calling it in some ways. Landorus, though, kind of comes out of the turn about the same. It kind of like didn't really do much, but it took that Ice Beam and now is on slightly little less health. But the Trick Room has not gone up here, so Joan is still in a really solid position now to be threatening so much more damage going into the next turn. Now, Ogerpon obviously has that Sword Dance, which Joan probably has a really nice opportunity to set up here, because staying into that Grass type, that Spore is not going to be able to affect it. Porygon 2's not offering too much damage into it either, and Landorus could threaten back with a lot more damage, so I wouldn't be surprised to see basically that Swords Dance set up here to be able to start threatening those Grassy Glides into future turns.
This Porygon 2 has definitely caught me by surprise, not going for that early Trick Room, instead just going for the Ice Beams and applying a lot of pressure to the opposing Landorus. Speaking of pressure, however, it is going to be the attack boost coming through onto this Ogerpon here as it drops its Grass typing and now is just a full-on Fire type. It is going to be able to go straight onto the offensive with the Ivy Cudgel and connect down onto that Porygon 2. So much damage, but surprisingly not going for the super effective damage into the Amoonguss. I mean, Porygon 2 was definitely a threat. Who needs to take an Ice Beam when you can take a KO?
Yeah, like, and a KO into Porygon 2 is nothing to shake a stick at, honestly. That is an impressive amount of damage from Joan's team. But the Amoonguss finally does land its mark with that Spore.
The thing is, though, yes, it does put the Landorus to sleep, and yes, the opposing Ogerpon does leave itself a little bit more vulnerable, but an Ivy Cudgel is just going to be able to absolutely take this Amoonguss out. It definitely doesn't worry about this. One issue, however, is of course going to be the Ting-Lu coming into the field. It is going to be lowering the special attack. This only really affects the Amoonguss and the opposing Landorus, but of course those ground type moves that can come through, something like the Stomping Tantrum, is going to hurt into that Ogerpon.
Yeah, especially now it's gone for that Terra, Lu. Yeah, it's going to take that damage a lot less well. However, the Amoonguss can go for the Terra Water still at this point to be able to take an Ivy Cudgel, particularly from Joan's Halflame. So the question is, does Yoel choose to lock that in now to be able to then get a Spore back into that Ogerpon? Because that could be a huge move there.
I think you made a great identification with the water terrestrialization, because if that does happen, Rillaboom's now on the field, so Yuan has a way to be able to counteract it. We are just going to see the Spiky Shield, the defensive play coming out from this Ogerpon as we see what the Ting-Lu is maybe going to get up to. Looks like it was going indeed for that Stomping Tantrum down into the opposing Ogerpon, as the Spore, of course, not going to be affecting that Rillaboom, as it is a Grass type.
Exactly, yeah. So a really nice safe switch in there for the Rillaboom as well. So you can see the Rillaboom setting up that Grassy Surge now enables the Ogerpon Halflame, which has Grassy Glide, to really like basically abuse the effect of it, where it has priority in that grassy terrain. So even if Trick Room had gone up, this Grassy Glide would have been able to go first a lot of the time. Now this Ogerpon is in a nice position to still threaten that KO onto the Amoonguss, but Yoel smartly potentially has not committed the Terra yet to the Amoonguss. So it might still be able to go for it this turn and catch Joan off guard and get off that Spore. However, Joan does have the Fake Out turn on the Rillaboom still going to this, so he's definitely still got put on the pressure at the moment. You probably want to put that into the Ting-Lu as you then pressure down that Amoonguss. So honestly, depends if the Amoonguss goes for the Spore or not here, and whether it also goes for the Terra.
Also, the Fake Out is going to be very critical at this point in time, can really slow down against the opposing Ting-Lu. Incineroar is going to join the field, though. The perfect Pokemon with its Intimidate ability to lower the attack stat of both these opposing Pokemon, putting Rillaboom at -1 and Ogerpon right back to neutral.
Right back to neutral, but there is that fake out into the correct target for this turn, and with a little bit of Rocky Helmet, it does kind of recoil that Rillaboom a bit more, but the Swords Dance is the perfect opportunity for Joan's Ogerpon to set up. That is looking scary.
Yeah, Ogerpon like, don't you dare drop my stat back to neutral. I'll tell you what, I will double fold it now. Instead of just being +1, hey, I'm +2.
+2, yeah, oh my goodness, yeah, very, very scary for this right now, because even into an Incineroar, which resists both of the Grassy Glide and the Ivy Cudgel, you're still going to be taking so much damage. Now, this Rillaboom does not actually have high horsepower, so it's not. So this Incineroar on Yoel's end is looking a little bit safer here. And now it's Yoel's turn to have that fake out pressure this time as well. The Rillaboom has spent that now, so the Incineroar can very safely fake out into that Ogerpon, and this Rillaboom can really not do very much. Question is, the Amoonguss, if the Spiky Shield comes out as we do, can't do too much either.
That's very true. A nice defensive play coming out from Juan here, as the Amoonguss also goes onto the defensive, going for a protect in the face of a potential Ivy Cudgel coming its way. Instead, the Wood Hammer will connect on the Incineroar. Being a fire type, it is not going to worry about that in the slightest. And now the Incineroar able to go for its own attack, but to no avail. It goes into the Spiky Shield.
Spiky Shield, so yeah, it's not going to do too much, and it's going to take a bit of recoil from that Spiky too. And we can see the grassy terrain revealing some of the speed interactions of these Pokemon as the Rillaboom heals up the Incen, and then that Amoonguss. So going straight into the next turn, it's been a little bit of a pause in the game last turn. We've kind of reset everything. The fake out's been spent, the Spiky Shield has been spent as well. So now this Ogerpon, with its +2 attack, is still really threatening that damage, but still, no Terror has been committed from Yoel's end. So the question is, does he go for it this time? As you can see, he's going to click on that button. He's very much considering it here as to whether to go for that Terra Water, because he has that Terra Water Amoonguss, and getting that Spore straight onto that Ogerpon is going to be huge. The question is, does Joan call it? Because if you go for the Terra Water, then a Wood Hammer from that Rillaboom, covered with an Ivy Cudgel, may still be enough to get that KO.
Yes, makes it very, very difficult to make that decision, because it could be the momental swing of the match to terrestrialize or not. Instead, Amoonguss isn't going to have to make that decision right now. It's going to be Tinglu on the field in its place instead. Ogerpon able to go on the offensive once again. This time, the Ivy Cudgel is going to come down and find its mark on that Tinglu. It does so much damage. I was not expecting that. The Rillaboom able to follow up with the Wood Hammer as well. That's a KO on Tinglu. It is out of here.
Absolutely out of here. Oh my goodness. That is so much damage, honestly. And like, yeah, still so bulky Pokemon just seem to be just getting destroyed by John's team. The Porygon 2 completely down. Tinglu completely down. The Incineroar, though, does have that option to go for the parting shot still.
I mean, that said, it was boosted due to the Swords Dance, and Incineroar on Yoel's side is trying its utmost to go for these Intimidates, to go for these parting shots. It went for the parting shot into the Spiky Shield previously, wasn't able to get it, was able to get it this turn, but the damage has been done by this opposing Ogerpon, getting that big KO on the Tinglu that was definitely a threat to the opposing team. It now means that Ogerpon can breathe a little easier.
Yeah, definitely a little easier right now. And again, Fake Out is on the board again for Yoel, but a simple Spiky Shield will keep this Ogerpon nice and safe. The Intimidate has reduced its offensive prowess a little bit more, plus that parting shot, but Ogerpon is still just such a powerful Pokemon. And the Amoonguss still may be in range of like a double up from both of these targets here. And you can see Joan still has all 4 Pokemon left, so a switch into their own Incineroar could be enough to kind of reduce the offensive presence of this Incineroar, which is arguably Yoel's only damage output.
That is very true, and taking a closer look as this turn goes through, it is going to be the U-turn, so switching up the ball position on Juan's side as well, allowing Rillaboom to get out of there, and I think critically just enable the fake out for later on in the match. All eyes really are on the Ogerpon to deal the damage, so it comes down to supportive Pokemon like the Rillaboom to enable it to stay on the field and get those critical knockouts. Incineroar comes in place. Hey, that's another way to get a fake out in.
It certainly is. Another fake out for us in this set here. So it is going to be the Flare Blitz, though, straight out of the gate into that Incineroar, but an amazing switch for Joan, taking absolutely nothing from that.
I want to know what this Amoonguss is doing, because it has completely avoided Ivy Cudgels and Flare Blitzes.
Yeah.
Even though it's there sitting so pretty to be the prime target, it's just not being hit by these fire-type moves at all, so it's definitely up to some tricks. It is able to go for the Pollen Puff and just help out its partner Pokemon a little bit more, but I would honestly question how long it's going to stay on in the field. Flare Blitz and Ivy Cudgel is going to hit hard, and at some point, Joan has to target down into it.
Yeah, it's going to happen at some point because the Amoonguss can still quite freely spawn into us. Incineroar and this Ogerpon and the Landorus Incarnate in the back now. So a lot of the resistances to Spore have now gone off the table for Joan, especially committing that Terror already. So yeah, it still is that Terror option on either of these targets. It's either the Terror Ghost on the Incineroar or the Terror Water on the Amoonguss. But honestly, the Terror Water is still looking really strong for this Amoonguss, but still doesn't go for it.
Yeah, Amoonguss just sitting pretty on the field. Is going to have to take the fake out though, and this time is another Swords Dance. So once again, Amoonguss breathes a sigh of relief, can get through the turn relatively unscathed. Knockoff, however, I think is a really interesting choice because you cannot actually knock off that mask, but the little bit of damage, I suppose, will stack up. The issue is Ogerpon is ready to go. These Swords Dances are primed. Even the Incineroar is going to struggle to take an Ivy Cudgel here.
Yeah, it certainly is. It's +2 attack Ogerpon right now. And because we need to remind ourselves that it's still got Terra Fire behind it. So you still have that extra boost to your fire type moves on top of the +2 attack it's already got. So this Incineroar is looking so strong right now. And plus, Joan has another turn of fake out to go into this next turn too. So like, it's a pretty safe kind of fake out into the Incineroar, for instance, or even to the Amoonguss, honestly. And then an Ivy Cudgel just somewhere. Incineroar can't protect. It's a very nice slot. You can just start whittling away Joel's resources.
You are once again playing the game of will the Amoonguss terrestrialize or won't it? It is indeed terrestrializing. It's the water terror on this Amoonguss, so it will be able to breathe a little bit easier in the face of these fire types now. But is it going to be too little too late? These Swords Dances are still going to stack up. It's still going to be a barrage of attacks on it later on, but once again, not this turn. Amoonguss can get through it. Instead, it's the Spiky Shield onto the opposing Ogerpon as the Flare Blitzers just get traded across onto that opposing Incineroar.
And there's the parting shot as well. But interesting to see the speed interactions between these two Incineroars, which could be quite critical going into future games as well. So we're seeing that Joan's Incineroar is likely the slower of the two compared to here. And that can make a big difference when they're facing each other on a turn one, for instance, for fake outs. But speaking of fake out, Rillaboom comes in for another fake out pressure.
Maybe it's not about the fire types taking down the Amoonguss, it's actually about the opposing Rillaboom, because now that it is a water type, these wood hammers are going to hurt, particularly as it has been able to come in unintimidated. At this point, Incineroar is already on the field, and it's going to be able to get the boost from the grassy terrain as well.
Yeah, exactly. And it's safely got in there too because the Incineroar had the slower parting shot. It was able to go after Yoel's flare blitzing Incineroar, so Rillaboom comes in very safely right now. But we do see that Amoonguss has Protect still on it, so which always gives the Amoonguss the option to kind of protect itself, obviously, and so Incineroar can then do the work. But Incineroar can't protect here from this potential Ivy Cudgel, which is coming out into that slot.
Yep, so much damage still, even though it is resisted, takes it below 50%, and the U-turn not enough to be able to get the KO, however. You know, I'm surprised. Sometimes that can deal a significant chunk to the Incineroar, but it definitely has a little bit of bulk to its brawn as well and is able to hang on for its trainer.
Incineroar back in yet again. That revolving door of Pokemon is very real right now in this round 4 of the Utrecht special event. And here's another Flare Blitz from Yoel's Incineroar, again into Joan's Incineroar. So Joan making incredible plays here, getting the Pokemon in exactly the right time to take these moves.
And finally, the Amoonguss able to connect a Spore onto the opposing Ogerpon as it has dropped its grass typing. It is now a prime victim for the sleep. I mean, it has definitely put in a shift throughout this match so far, doing a lot of damage, going for a lot of Swords Dances. So maybe it does need to take a little bit of rest and relaxation in order to come back fresh into this match. The issue is, can Yoel capitalize on this opportunity? He only has these last 2 remaining Pokemon, the Amoonguss and the Incineroar. And let's be honest, Amoonguss not known for being able to hit hard, and Incineroar on very dwindling HP.
Yeah, it's looking like Yoel definitely has the back against the wall here. Incineroar is the main way to deal this damage here with the Flare Blitz, honestly. Amoonguss does have that Pollen Puff, which can deal neutral damage into the Incineroar, and that's unaffected by the Intimidate. So with maybe a few critical hits behind Amoonguss, having that Terra Water as well makes it a good matchup into it.
It definitely does, and does give a little bit of flexibility on the field. The Rage Powder comes through, however, protecting the Incineroar, knowing it's the one that's going to have to deal the damage out there as the Ogerpon takes a turn of sleep. The knockoff comes through onto the opposing Incineroar, is going to be able to remove the safety goggles from the field, meaning that now maybe the Amoonguss is going to be able to put that Pokemon to sleep as well, and it could be a slow and steady match for Yoel to try and take victory. But then you have to play that game of when will the Pokemon break up, and that is something that my blood pressure can never handle, David.
Well, hopefully this will put you at ease, because there is a chance now for Ogerpon to wake up at this point here. So, and as everything goes on, we're a little bit more certain as to when that's going to happen, but likely it's still going to stay off sleep, unfortunately, for Joan here. But still looking at though that pure fire type is a really nice type to be right now. It's really not getting much damage potential into it from a Flare Blitz, which has been weakened by Intimidate, or a knockoff even as well, and Pollen Puff's not going to do much either.
Yeah, and I have to correct myself, actually. The safety goggles are on Yoel's side, not on Joan's side. Instead, it lost its edible little citrus berry there, so not going to have as much longevity on the field, but was already a prime target for the Amoonguss. However, it's not planning to go for that. It's like, Incineroar, you need my help a little bit more. Take a Pollen Puff, get some HP, because I need you to carry this match through for me.
Yeah, this Amoonguss is certainly putting in so much work right now. Like, it's been able to sit on the floor for so long and healing up Incineroar multiple times as well. Like, Joan's had to try and, like, it's already KO'd technically, like, more than one Incineroar right now. But, like, it's just still sitting on the field here doing Incineroar things.
Yes, and Ogerpon wants to do Ogerpon things as it goes for the Ivy Cudgel, just trying to get this pesky Incineroar off the field, but it's not able to do it. The Incineroar's going for another knockoff here, but I have to say, the grassy terrain is also playing a massive role in this match. It's able to get that recovery because these knockoffs are doing nothing, and they're going to do even less considering there's now been the parting shot. Yeah,
so another parting shot here. Looks like these trainers are knowing what's going on here. Joan, I think maybe hope the Incineroar was going to go down there to that Incineroar, but not quite. So parting shot comes straight out again, and there's that Spore, but not going to be affecting that Rillaboom. But yet again, Incineroar gets away with staying like on the field this turn. So the question is, can Amoonguss get another Pollen Puff off Lou?
That's the thing. I think it's on its last legs, however, because even if the Amoonguss is able to go for the Pollen Puff here, you've got the Fake Out coming in from the Rillaboom, you've got the Ivy Cudgels just raining down on you from this opposing Ogerpon. So I think it's wise to go for the forfeit here and just get into game 2. There's so much information both these trainers have been able to glean from each other about the speed interactions of the Pokemon, but also their relative bulk in investment, so they can see exactly how the trainers have trained them.
Yeah, exactly. It gives a lot of information that the team sheets alone do not give, especially in these open team sheet best of 3 sets. So yes, Joan Poyato taking that first win quite convincingly, honestly. Like, it really kind of shows how Ogerpon Half-Flame has maybe gone underexplored a little bit, or maybe people are maybe under-preparing for a little bit, maybe preparing more for that Ogerpon Wellspring. But here it is, setting up those Swords Dances, and being immune to those Spores to start with, and then can really pile on the offensive pressure with those Ivy Cudgels.
Yes, and I like the defensive plays that were coming through as well, going for these wide spiky shields, going for the fake outs to just enable a little bit of longevity or to set up one of those Swords Dances, did give Joanne a little bit more of an advantage. One thing Yoel, I think, did very well, however, was just keep piloting and pivoting in Pokemon like the Incineroar and the Amoonguss, because then they were in a prime position to either go for the fake out or even go for something like the Spore. I think it was always a bit of an uphill struggle, however, when Yoel wasn't able to get the Trick Room off at the very, very beginning, and I like the strategy, going for those Ice Beams. It immediately would catch the Landorus user off guard. However, it just wasn't able to then get the ball rolling to help the Amoonguss a little bit more, to help Pokemon maybe like the Tinglu to really, really thrive. And I really like the play. As much as I am rooting for Tinglu in this tournament, I really like the play where it went down. It did just show that Yuan identified a potential threat. Like, hey, I've got 2 fire types on the field right now. I need to get rid of this Stomping Tantrum Pokemon because it's going to be so disruptive. It's going to affect my special attackers as well. Although, to be fair, the last 3 were all physical attackers, but it just needs to go. And he was able to eliminate it very quickly.
Yeah, like in great fashion too. And that's the disadvantage of not running a Pokemon with Protect as well. It makes it a very safe target into that slot. And so with Tinglu having that Sulfus, it makes it very like susceptible to a double up like that. But I really like your point you made about like Trick Room going up, particularly that, well, Trick Room not going up rather. Like it just really didn't help because then Yoel's team was just entirely slow every single time, apart from the Incineroar Mirror here. But what I'd actually like Yoel even to switch up on is that Komodo, because the Ogerpon was such a problem, and Komodo can very much take on those hits much better. Yeah,
I would love to see a bold adjustment out of the blocks. Instead, it's going to be the Porygon 2 with the Incineroar, so that is indeed a change. And I like it. You can go for the fake out of your very own and maybe enable a Trick Room to be set up very early doors. The Incineroar and the Landorus on the opposing side, again, very, very standard lead, allowing maybe the Landorus to try and get some damage out on the board and maybe get rid of this Incineroar with a cheeky Earth Power as soon as it can.
Yeah, so it definitely threatens a lot of damage here, and we also into the Porygon 2 as we saw last game. But yeah, I like this lead from Yoel actually, because based on the information from game 1, Yoel now knows that their own Incineroar is faster than Joanne's Incineroar, and so the decision is in their court as to which fake out target that they can go for. But actually looks like Yoel is pulling it back straight away into that Amoonguss, and oh, we may even see a Trick Room here. Let's see.
This was the lead that actually came out in game 1, Amoonguss and Porygon 2 front and center. So possibly indicating now that it's back in play that this is going to be the Trick Room, because then Amoonguss is in prime position to go for some of these cheeky spores. Terrestrialization comes out of the block though as well, and I love to see this on the Landorus, making sure that it could not take a fake out from that Incineroar if it was still in play. However, the Porygon 2 has to take the fake out from the opposing one. There is indeed the Earth Power. Wow, so much damage into the Amoonguss. If that had been the Incineroar, it would be toast.
Yeah, completely toast. But honestly, like, again, another such bulky Pokemon has taken so much damage, and no Trick Room setup either for this Porygon 2. So there's nothing stopped Joan going for that Earth Power yet again into the Amoonguss. No Terror is going to help it either. Porygon 2 could get up a Trick Room, but it will be a turn too late for Amoonguss. So the question is, does Yoel go on the Protect for this Amoonguss and try and get Porygon 2 to go for that Trick Room here instead? Assuming it can survive a double up from both of these targets, which it could likely can, I'd say, because you've got the Intimidate already on the Incineroar on Joan's end, so then Trick can go up relatively for free, and then in future turns, Porygon 2 can just start recovering up.
It's an obvious play, though, to go for the Protect, so just going in for this Earth Power, and I actually really like this play. KOs the Amoonguss. It was a pretty safe one, because at the end of the day, there's not a lot that you can do to the opposing Porygon 2. You might as well target down that Amoonguss into play, and the Incineroar can go for that cheeky parting shot, just lower the special attack that it had got boosted from its ability at the beginning of the game. And now Porygon 2, yes, if it does want to go for something like a Trick Room, it's not in the strongest position to deal with this opposing Landorus. If it doesn't obviously terrestrialize itself, the normal Terra Blasts aren't going to be able to go into the Ghost. The Ice Beams aren't going to be able to do much to it anyway, because it's no longer got the 4x super effective weakness. But at least there's Trick Room on the field, Pokemon trainers. It's finally here. This Porygon 2 has done it.
Yeah, this is what Yoel had been waiting for, I think. Looking at the Pokemon here as well, that Komodo is a fairly speedy Pokemon, but this one probably not trained to be that speedy, so it's probably going to definitely make the most of it right now. And in front of this Rillaboom as well, this Rillaboom is not offering any damage into it. The Landorus, on the other hand, is going to be the main threat that can hit this Komodo, even if Dire defenses go up, because the Landorus hits on that special attacking side. However, the Porygon 2 has a lot of special attack behind it, now at neutral because of the parting shot, but still an Ice Beam or a Terra Blast can still deal a decent bit of damage into that Landorus, which otherwise usually isn't very bulky.
Komodo has to play it carefully, though, now. It wants to be able to get those iron defenses up and start dealing some big damage. Woodhammer, big damage indeed. Able to get the critical hit onto that opposing Porygon 2. Is the Landorus going to be able to follow up and get the knockout? That is the question. The iron defense comes up onto this Komodo, but in the face of a special attacker, that is going to be null and void. The Earth Power is enough to get the knockout. I don't know if the critical hit mattered. Probably did. I mean, Porygon 2 is incredibly bulky, but I was definitely a Porygon Z user, so my calculations on Porygon 2 are a little rusty.
Yeah, honestly, it depends on the training, I think, of either of these trainers, really. Like, it could have been really close, to be fair, but either way, Porygon 2 going down for Joan again in the second game is absolutely massive. However, Yoel's putting all of their eggs into the Komodo basket right now. Defenses are up on this Komodo, so body presses are going to start doing that damage. However, not into this Terra Ghost Landorus, however, so it's still going to rely on the Iron Head, which isn't going to do that much damage either. And with the Incineroar in the back, Joan can lower the attack set of the Komodo even further, and the other physical attacker is this Incineroar, so Joan's still got plenty of options into the rest of this game.
I'm loving this Terra Ghost Landorus. Does give it so much immunity on the field from things like Fake Out, the Terra Blast, the Body Press, like you were saying, and it's just able to sit pretty on the field, go for a Protect and burn through one of these Trick Room turns. U-turn with another critical hit. Calm down, Rillaboom. Able to just get a little bit of damage onto the Incineroar, but again, critically, the thing here is that you can bring Fake Out in again. You can bring the Incineroar in from the back. It can go for an Intimidate, it can go for a Fake Out, and just slow down these Trick Room turns. At the same time, slowing down the Komodo. That will enable the Landorus to be able to start getting some big damage off onto the board.
You certainly can, and look what's coming in here. It's the Raging Bolt that's really switching things up, but it's going to be taking a Body Press for its troubles, and what a bulky Pokemon, but it takes it so, well, not that well, honestly. That is a lot of damage onto the Raging Bolt here, and seeing that the grassy terrain kind of reveals a bit more of the speeds about the interactions of this Pokemon in the Trick Room scenario.
It also highlights the strength of Komodo and when it can get set up, how dangerous it can be. Speaking of danger, though, Landorus actually isn't quite as safe as I thought. The Incineroar is running that knockoff. That will be a super effective move, considering it is now a Ghost type. So that is something that the Landorus has to pivot in and around. I mean, there are still all 4 Pokemon remaining on Joan's side, so possibly you could switch it out, preserve it for when the Trick Room is over.
Yeah, so there's plenty of options that Joan kind of has here, whereas Yoel is definitely stuck in with the last 2 Pokemon. No switching available, stat changes can't happen either, but there is a Landorus switch.
Did the Komodo body press into that slot? Because that would be a really awesome call. Body pressing into a ghost type when a super effective damaging Pokemon like the Incineroar is coming into its play. We have yet to tell. I think it's wise that the Raging Bolt does go for the Protect here, just wanting to make sure it doesn't get KO'd by another one of those body presses, as the Incineroar decides to take a leaf out of Yuan's playbook here and go for a parting shot of its very own, just neutralizing some of the offensive pressure that the Incineroar can have.
Oh my goodness.
That's it. It was the body press going into a fantastic call. That was a ghost type Pokemon. Then it is an Incineroar. Super effective damage. High risk, high reward. Yoel, fantastic play.
Madness. Absolutely mad play. Like body pressing into the ghost type. Love that. So, okay. Yeah, that definitely is going to put Yoel in a better position now. Taking an absolutely free KO there. Taking nothing back that turn either. Exactly what he needed to kind of get the momentum into his favor, honestly, really. And still with the Terra option, as we can see here too. So that is going to enable the Incineroar to potentially take an Earth Power much better from a Landorus that is still on the opposite side of the field now. But the Raging Bolt is still here at the moment, and that offers Thunderclap as a priority attack. So it's going to be able to get an attack off before it goes down, because it's likely to be able to go down to a Komodo hit again, as we saw how much body press it did. And the Incineroar on the other end, that still does have that knockoff, which might be enough, but depends, because the Incineroar had just come in on Joan's end and intimidated it. So again, the damage calculations are really vague at the moment. We're really not sure how much damage everything's going to do.
Yeah, it may not be enough to be able to get the knockout, but definitely put Landorus in a vulnerable position. It's actually back in the exact same spot. It just switched out to avoid, and now things look a little bit more tricky for it. So I think it's wise that it's going to be able to go for a Protect here, enabling Rillaboom to join the field, where you have the capability to go for that Fake Out in the next turn and be able to try and get some damage off with this Landorus. It looks like it was the parting shot going down into that slot, but it does find its mark on a Protect, as the body press nearly gets the KO on the Rillaboom. Not quite enough, however.
No, not enough, but that is big, honestly, for Joan, because then the Fake Out turn really makes a big difference into the next turn. And we've just seen the Trick Room has expired as well. So Landorus is now the fastest thing on the field, most likely, and threatens so much damage into this Incineroar, unless we see the Terra on in that Ghost type there, which would also make it immune to the Fake Out that the Rillaboom also has. So it's a definite option for Yoel at this point. But the Rillaboom still has to contend with this Komodo, and so does Joan's Landorus, and that's got to be the main way to build damage into it right now. So Joan really needs to make sure his Landorus stays safe for that Komodo.
I honestly love this Ghost Terror as well. As you said, means that the Fake Out will not be able to connect onto the Incineroar, means it will not be able to flinch, meaning Incineroar is able to go for that knockoff and finally get damage onto the board against that opposing Landorus, as well as losing its weakness to those ground type moves. Komodo actually able to finish the Rillaboom off, like bye-bye, see you, go back into your Pokeball, and now all eyes do come down onto this opposing Incineroar. Is it going to go for the knockoff? Yes, it is. Is not enough, however. Those Intimidates really paying off from earlier.
Yeah, that's a massive turn for Yoel, honestly. No Fake Out either into that Komodo is absolutely huge, and we can see the Komodo actually outsped the Rillaboom as well, which is also massive. So we might have been seeing like a U-turn, for instance, from Joan's Rillaboom instead to be able to get it out safely, but it's not this time, and that Landorus can't do as much damage into the following turns. Yeah,
Landorus is going to fall victim to the Earth Power. Now it's a 2v1 situation in Juan's favor. The issue is, of course, the Komodo is still incredibly healthy, but it has all these defense boosts in the face of a special attacker in the form of that Landorus that isn't going to mind that at all. It's able to get the KO onto the opposing Raging Bolt, but it cannot physically get a KO onto this opposing Landorus.
Well, we've got the Iron Head now. It is at -1 attack as well, so this Landorus still might be able to survive one attack, but it depends if this Earth Power can 2-hit KO or not. Let's see. It's not quite enough, so we might see the Iron Head. Let's see if this is enough as well. No, it's not either.
That's true, it does have the Iron Hand of its sleeve, but it's not able to get the knockout on this turn. It looks like it might be able to take one more of those. The issue is, of course, the leftovers on this Komodo. It could be the last ticket that it needs in order to get through this match. Very wise Protect, being able to get that little bit more longevity on the field and forcing this Landorus to keep going through its Earth Powers.
Yeah, it has to keep going, and there may be a point that Yoel's Komodo is starting to get healthy enough that it can now and then take 2 more Earth Powers still. That's the question now. Here comes the Iron Head. Is it going to be enough this time into this Landorus? First it needs to take this Earth Power. It still takes it. It's not going to be able to take another one. Ironhead, it is enough!
It does. We're going to a Game 3, Pokemon trainers. All the action is happening here at the Utrecht special event. What an absolute showdown in that Game 2. Komodo, you just called it, David. You wanted to see that adjustment coming into Game 2, and it certainly did not disappoint.
Oh my goodness, yeah, it certainly didn't. And like, Yoel was 4-2 down so early in that game as well. And then to completely turn it around was absolutely incredible to see. Calling every slot so well. That Incineroar switch in as well. Like as it switched in rather, was like incredible. Getting that Komodo, oh my goodness, yeah. What a game. What a game to show off Komodo.
And I really do think Komodo was the story the whole way through that. It was able to get the iron defense up really, really easily towards the beginning of the game, and then just had that longevity on the field. The body presses were able to get some good knockouts left, right, and center, and then even down towards the end, the Iron Hand was just enough. And it would not have been possible without the Incineroar, and I think that's the other Pokemon I really want to champion. It had a lot of flexibility coming in with the fake outs and the intimidates, but the constant threat of that knockoff into the opposing Landorus was what enabled the Iron Heads to get the knockout in the end. So it really did come down to that Ghost Terrestrialization, being able to enable the Landorus, the Incineroar to hang on after the first Earth Power, which it wouldn't have been able to do otherwise, and then get that knockoff off, was able to allow the Komodo to get victory.
Yeah, that's a really good point, actually. The Terra type coming into like absolutely play for this entire game. And if it had been that Terra Poison instead that we most commonly see on Landorus Incarnate, then the knockoff obviously wouldn't have done as much, but then would have been actually more susceptible to the body press than the Komodo. So you've got a damage trade-off there either way. So Yoel may have still been able to kind of clinch it out there with a boosted body press in that end game too. So yeah, the question is, going into Game 3 now, obviously that worked for Yoel going with that, I'm going to say Dragonite there, with that Komodo there.
Yeah.
But like, does Joan like switch things up again here? Maybe even look to that Bronzong potentially.
Yeah, Bronzong could be an interesting choice just to kind of retaliate with the same strategy with those body presses. But the issue that you've got is still that Amoonguss. Amoonguss, a Pokemon that can thrive in Trick Room, being able to put opposing Pokemon to sleep, just can kind of stop it in its tracks a little bit, as well as the fact that you have such strong Fire-type Pokemon like the Incineroar that can come into the fray and just be a little bit disruptive. You could, of course, just go for the slow and steady situation, go for the Terrafire yourself so that you're not going to have to worry so much about anything the Incineroar can do, because actually, you know, Knockoff and Flare Blitz are both things Bronzong won't appreciate at all. So I wonder if that will be the adaptation, or if it's just going to be more of the offensive pressure on Huan's side of the field.
Yeah, and that is definitely the offensive pressure that we've seen. So it's the third time in a row we've seen Incineroar plus Landorus Incarnate for Joan. And for Yoel's end, it's Incineroar plus Porygon 2, which was the same lead as in Game 2. So looks like Yoel sticking with, well, this worked last time, I'm going to do it again.
Exactly. Yeah, Trick Room was what was needed, right? It's what was able to get through that game too. So I see no reason why Yoel wouldn't want to maybe try and get that up again. But surely David is tempting to go for Ice Beam here.
Yes, that Ice Beam could be very big right now. And it definitely forces Joan to actually spend that Terra onto that Ghost. And if you're spending your Terra really early on, it gives you your opponent so many more options and makes it so much clearer as to what to do. Whereas as we saw in Game 1, where the Amoonguss Terra was saved for so long, it kept things guessing.
The fake out just goes straight down across the board, so there's going to be no damage dealt really here in this turn 0, just a couple of fake outs being traded. So all eyes really do come down to this next turn. There is no more fake out utility. Are we going to see some parting shots potentially to lower the offensive pressure of the Pokemon on the opposing side of the field? And is Porygon 2 going to Ice Beam or Trick Room? Yeah, and
what something could be interesting as well is that obviously we've seen the Landorus go for a substitute in Game 1 to be able to take an Ice Beam really well. And the question is, the speed interactions between the Incineroar and the Porygon 2 could be such that a Flare Blitz could knock out a substitute, and then an Ice Beam follow-up could then knock out the Landorus again. So if Yoel could maybe call Joan maybe doing that, that would be a massive play and get it out of the way really quickly.
Yes, because the Source Substitute kind of does a little bit of the work for you, taking rid of 25% of the HP of that Pokemon. It could give the advantage that is needed. Ting Lu's back, however, and this Lu is very happy to see it for sure. It is going to be a Protect coming out from the opposing Landorus, however, just not wanting to risk the potential Ice Beam coming through as the Incineroar decides to capitalize on this and get out of there with the parting shot. Just going to be able to neutralize the Porygon 2 a little bit more and possibly intimidate a little bit later on. That could be critical considering that the Ting Lu has come into the field. It is a physical attacker and you want to be able to stop it from going through your team.
Rillaboom is the choice of Pokemon coming in here, as it has been for Joan in both of the previous games as well, bringing Fake Out right back onto the field and threading a lot of Grass-type damage into that Ting Lu particularly.
Yes, and there's the Trick Room, David. What we know this Porygon 2 loves to see, and Tinglu may be in a good position to be able to start capitalizing on this. The issue, however, is the Rillaboom on the field. With that Grassy Glide priority, it's not going to worry about the speed tiers.
No, it definitely isn't. But for Tinglu, hopefully, it's going to be able to take at least a Grassy Glide. But a Wood Hammer, on the other hand, possibly not, because Rillaboom's really strong, honestly. But like with Intimidate in the back for Yoel could be a really nice switch in for that Incineroar to be able to lower the offensive pressure a little bit of that Rillaboom and keep this Tinglu much safer. Because Tinglu offers a lot of offensive pressure, particularly from that Throat Chop or into that Heavy Slam.
That's very true, and I think Lander is getting out of there going, I do not want to take an Ice Beam, so we're going to bring a Fire-type Pokemon into this slot instead to be able to take that much, much better, as well as get that Intimidate down onto the Tinglu. The Ice Beam was indeed the move of choice here, and you can see Incineroar able to take that incredibly well, as the Tinglu follows up, however, with the Throat Chop.
Yeah, there's the Throat Chop into the Incineroar, which is going to prevent it being able to parting shot in following turns. And there's the Wood Hammer, but it's not quite enough to KO this Tinglu. Massive survival there.
You said it does big damage, and it certainly does, particularly boosted up by that grassy terrain. Of course, a Terrestrialization onto the Tinglu would have been able to help out a little bit there, but it was not the choice here. Instead, just shutting down that opposing Incineroar with the Throat Chop, I think, has been a really nice pivoting play.
Yeah, that definitely stops the revolving door Pokemon a little bit more here, putting a wedge onto that door instead. So the Porygon 2, now still in that Trick Room, is offering a lot of damage potential with the Ice Beams and that Terra Blast as well into either of these slots here. So Yoel really needs to make the most of these Trick Room turns, I think, at the moment. And as we can see, the Porygon 2 is still at neutral special attack, offering a decent amount of offensive presence, and that Stomping Tantrum is definitely a threat from this Tinglu.
Yes, it definitely is. And Tinglu getting out of there going, I do not want to take a Grassy Glide because that would be more than enough to finish me off. So that is why the Incineroar, being a fire type, is able to come in here, and we actually are seeing both these trainers identifying the type weaknesses of their Pokemon and bringing in Pokemon that can take those attacks really, really well. Fake Out goes down into Porygon 2, doesn't want to risk something like the Ice Beam going into the Grass type Rillaboom, as the Rillaboom actually just going straight for a U-turn here, not a Grassy Glide. U-turn, I think, is a great choice. It would have still been able to get the KO onto that opposing Tinglu, but does enable Yuan a little bit more flexibility.
Yeah, it does. Like, it means you can bring in Rillaboom at a later stage and go for another Fake Out again. So Landorus coming in nice and safely here as well. That's the advantage of having a pivoting move when you're also going last in the turn as well, where you can switch in something that's a little bit frailer, like that Landorus Incarnate, much more safely, knowing it's not going to be able to take an attack. However, going to the next turn, Porygon 2 is still sitting there with an Ice Beam, so it can still definitely threaten down this Landorus. So Joan needs to either go for the Protect, go for that Terror, or even switch it out yet again to be able to take this Ice Beam that's very much likely coming out from Yoel's end.
Wouldn't be surprised to see the Protect come through, because it's not like you can switch into the Incineroar in the back anymore, because it is currently on the field, and you don't want to bring your Rillaboom in to take an Ice Beam either. It does have the Assault Burst, so it'll be able to take it reasonably well, but hey, why risk a potential freeze chance here, you know?
Oh no, you've spoken it into existence, Cialu. Let's see if that actually does end up happening, because it certainly turns games on its head. But it's going to be the Terra Ghost again for this Landorus Incarnate into this game 3 here. And there's the party shot into the Incineroar now this time instead, as it will be slowly switching out yet again.
Komodo makes another appearance in this set, but it's a little bit later than it was in game 2. Of course, Komodo just wants to be able to get the iron defenses up so it can start threatening with those body presses. Once again, you see the Ghost Landorus on the opposing side of the field, a Pokemon that isn't going to have to worry about those body presses. It really comes down to all the other partner Pokemon that are going to suffer from taking damage there.
Yeah, it's a really good point, but I'd really like seeing the Komodo yet again at the moment now. So it looks like Yoel's gone for a very similar plan, but switching up that Amoonguss to actually the Tinglu in this instance. And I really like that switch up, because the Amoonguss wasn't doing a whole lot into the rest of the team, but Tinglu offers that Vessel of Ruin to be able to reduce the offensive presence of that Landorus that was doing so much damage back into the Komodo. And obviously, probably the only thing that can do decent damage into the Komodo. But there's the Earth Power finishing it off.
Yeah, exactly, but it does give Komodo that breathing room that it might need, and Tinglu, I think it kind of done its job, maybe is a little bit more expendable now on the team, because you really want the Incineroar to stay nice and healthy to provide that support to Komodo, and you need the Porygon 2 to pressure with things like the Ice Beam, to pressure with things like the potential Trick Room for later on in the match. Of course, now the Ice Beam only really going to be targeting down into that opposing Rillaboom, although it will still do a significant chunk to Landorus, and as we saw in game 2, all the damage can stack up in that end game.
Yeah, it definitely can. And Porygon 2 just got a special attack boost again, so that's going to really stack up damage as well, even if to something that doesn't doesn't not take super effective damage from it either. Question is, can Komodo start setting up here? Because Joan still has 4 pretty healthy Pokemon still, and Joan's done a great job of stalling out the Trick Room on Yoel's end. So the main thing that's going to make a difference for that is if Komodo does start getting up those Iron defenses to start doing the damage. But there's the Ice Beam with his final turn of Trick Room into the Landorus, but not doing quite enough for a 2-hit KO.
Yeah, definitely underwhelming damage to what we're used to when we see an Ice Beam go down into a Landorus. The Wood Hammer just chipping away at this opposing Komodo, but not enough to stop it for going for this Iron defense. This is where Komodo wants to be. It can now apply a lot of offensive pressure with those opposing attacks. However, the Landorus is doing its best to get rid of it, so it does not have to face it down in a showdown at the end again. That was a big amount of damage coming through from the Earth Power.
Yeah, absolutely huge, to be honest. And now that is the last turn of Trick Room as well, completely up. So this Komodo is going to be on the back foot yet again for this Landorus now. It could just threaten a damage right back in. However, the Porygon 2 isn't looking too shabby, to be honest. That's full health. So,
yep.
And the grassy terrain has run out too, so the Wood Hammer damage is reduced too. So there's a pretty safe Trick Room plus Protect here that Yoel can go for, which is probably going to be quite crucial to be able to get the rest of this game going. And even if Joan kind of calls it, doubles into the Porygon 2, there's still probably not going to be a KO, and therefore can start dishing damage right back at them into the future turns. But again, Joan stalled the Trick Room turns out last time when Yoel had all 4 Pokemon left, and now Yoel only has 3 Pokemon left, so could likely still do it again, unless Yoel makes some crazy reads that like he did in Game 2 with that body press.
Honestly, really surprised to not see a Protect come out there, actually. You know, thinking the Protect, get a little bit of leftover recovery, a cheeky Trick Room, it'll be great. But no, it has gone before I can even get the words out of my mouth here. The U-turn is going to come through into that Porygon 2 as well and just make some adjustments on the Rillaboom side. But I really am skeptical as to whether the power of an Incineroar and a Porygon 2 are going to be enough to take down the Titans of all 4 remaining Pokemon on Joan's side.
Well, Porygon 2 is a bulky Pokemon, and it's got Recover. So I have seen a world where Porygon 2 can solo game somehow if the damage potential of the opponent is not enough to deal at least half the damage in one turn, because the Recover obviously then heals up half the HP. So that is now Yoel's win condition here. They need to try and make sure that Porygon 2 stays healthy enough and can consistently deal damage across the board to be able to deal it, but it's definitely going to be an uphill struggle.
Yes, it will be. It looks a little bit difficult. Yes, you can go for something like the knockoff into the Landorus, but we've already seen that it can be underwhelming, particularly if these Intimidates from the opposing Incineroar are able to come through, and that is exactly the position that Joan has available to him at this point. Joan is actually in his very first season of competitive Pokemon play, so really is trying to carve out a name for himself, and by using these Pokemon in such an eloquent way, revolving them in and out and just applying so much pressure, he's demonstrating that he really is knowing how this team works.
Exactly. Like, this team is particularly repressive, and like, it's so good into so many different options. Now, Incineroar is going for that Terror, as it's done in many times across the previous set, and it's going to be that Ghost Terror, meaning no fake outs can affect it. Earth powers are going to be taken a lot better, so that's definitely what is going to be needed here to be able to take this game. But there's the Protect from that Landorus. The question is, has Yoel called it here?
Ghost Terrors seem to be all the range right now, and it's definitely giving these trainers a little bit more longevity on the field. It is going to be, once again, the parting shot coming through, and honestly, I don't see a reason for the Incineroar to be going for anything else right now. Just playing that long end game, going to make sure that there's no offensive pressure coming through from these 2 Pokemon that cannot switch on Yoel's side to reset any of those stat drops, and then enabling your partner Pokemon to just chip away and get some KOs.
Rillaboom here yet again. Setting up that Grassy Surge may actually be better for Yoel's Porygon 2, honestly, because that means that's more recovery every turn for it to be able to last a little bit longer, get off those recovers, or maybe not need it to get off recovers as soon as it needs to either. But the question is, though, can Yoel still stall it out? And that probably is the case, because Porygon 2 can't protect either, so it's very susceptible to a fake out every single time. So looking like fake out into the Porygon 2 looks kind of safe here, plus attacking with the Landorus that's just protected as well. Incineroar's not going to be able to dish out much damage either, and Incineroar is still in the back for Joan as well, to be able to switch it back in again, lower the offensive pressure of the Incineroar, and stop it taking KOs on either of these targets.
The Ghost Terror on the Incineroar also can be a little bit detrimental, considering that now it will be taking big damage from the Grassy Glide and the Wood Hammer as well, so it doesn't really have that safety in the face of the Rillaboom that it's had previously. Here comes another Intimidate coming through. Who would have thought it? It's really the strategy that Joan needs to be able to just guarantee and lock up this win condition. Oh, okay, Rillaboom's frozen. This is not the time to do this, Rillaboom. You need to be able to come through. But the Flare Blitz follow-up is eventually going to be able to get the knockout. So the freeze didn't matter here at all, but just a little tense moment for us as viewers.
It just makes it a little bit easier for Rillaboom as it goes down, but yeah, like a little bit of insult to injury there, showing that potential to get further freezes to the rest of the team, honestly. The Incineroar, though, on Joan's end would be a little bit safer from a freeze, because Flare Blitz means you do thaw from it as soon as you click into that move, but Landorus wouldn't be safe. But we have seen Landorus can take an Ice Beam. That damage from there, I think, was an Ice Beam earlier, so it knows it can take another one, potentially even another one after a parting shot comes out from the Joan's Incineroar to lower the special attack of this Porygon 2 in the later stages of this game. So yeah, this Porygon 2 is still looking healthy. The Incineroar's looking healthy as well. So you are still very much managing this board position now. He's taking down another Pokemon, and there's just 3 more to go.
And you have the grassy terrain to contend with as well, particularly as that Landorus isn't a flying type anymore. It's going to be able to reap the benefits from it here too, and that could give it a little bit more longevity in the face of these Ice Beams. Porygon 2 just trying to take it down, but the Wise Protect to soak up some of that grassy terrain before it leaves the field is really nice. The Will-O-Wisp coming through, though, not something you see every day, and definitely not something you see normally going into an Incineroar. But this Ghost Terror actually being so detrimental to the Incineroar on Yoel's side of the field, it is now burned. You don't even need to worry about the parting shots and the Intimidates anymore, because that attack stat has been dropped.
It certainly has. And the thing about critical hits as well is that it doesn't bypass the effect the burn has either. So it makes it a lot safer for Joan to position around, knowing that even if a critical hit happens, it's still going to be a very much reduced damage thanks to that burn.
Exactly, just makes things a little bit more difficult for Yoel, but a little bit more of a relief for Joan here trying to close out this particular set. It's definitely been a long one, but these trainers have been able to calculate every single move to make sure that they're not giving too much momentum to their opponent. Porygon 2, again, just able to go for some of these Ice Beams into something like the Landorus, but my question is, what can it really do to the Incineroar?
Yeah, it's a good point. There's not a whole lot, really. Like Terra Blast would be the main thing for the Porygon 2 to go into Joan's Incineroar, and going back into that Ghost type, you've still got at least the knockoff as well. There's the Ice Beam as well. Let's see if it gets a freeze. No, not quite. But there's a Flare Blitz. Now taking not so, that damage not so well anymore on Incineroar, but still taking it very, very well. Such a bulky Pokemon. Follow it with that knockoff, though, is enough for another KO with that Grilly to go ahead.
Do you know what? I think it needed that to be able to get the knockout there.
Yeah.
Just due to all the Intimidates, parting shots, and of course the burn as well. I think the Landorus would have been able to hang on, so that was definitely what you need in order to try and pull through this game. Things definitely look a little bit more even now. You have an Incineroar versus an Incineroar, and we actually haven't been able to see Joan's last Pokemon as of yet, so it's time to reveal who is the Pokemon behind the Pokeball.
I think it needs to be that Ogerpon Half-Flame if there's going to be a decent chance to take down this Porygon 2, but no, it's the Raging Bolt instead. This is the safety goggles set with Thunderbolt, Draco Meteor, Thunderclap, and Protect, so there's no damage boosting move there. So honestly, I don't think it's going to be able to deal enough damage to this Porygon 2 where it will put it in range, to go past through all the recovers that this Porygon 2 can go for. So honestly, it's coming down to the wire really as to how Joan is going to be able to deal with it. It's going to have to be Flare Blitz after Draco Meteor, after maybe Draco Meteor crit, Thunderbolt Paralysis potentially could put it in its favor. And that is more likely to happen the longer the game goes on anyway, because the more turns you have, the more chances you have of getting those additional effects like those burns, those paralysis, which Joan may need to be relying on here.
The issue though, as you said earlier, is the recover on that Porygon 2. It's definitely a problem, because particularly if you go for something like the Draco Meteors, you're going to be lowering your special attack, and you can't switch out anymore. There's only 2 remaining Pokemon. Not able, even with the Thunderbolt, to be able to get the KO down onto that opposing Incineroar, and you are going to have your special attack and attack dropped by a parting shot. This could be kind of the last hurrah for the Incineroar on Yoel's side. However, it's definitely in a very vulnerable position. But the Porygon 2 trying to have the last laugh here and go for the Trick Room. This does enable it to go for very fast recovers if and when it needs to.
Yeah, it definitely does. So it means you can kind of recover knowing how much you're going to recover rather than trying to anticipate it in the future turns. But grassy terrain does subside now. That's probably good for Joan right now, because you definitely don't want to give this Porygon 2 the least amount of health that it can have. Now, we know the interactions with the speeds of the Incineroar here. So Joan's Incineroar with the Trick Room up should go first here and be able to dispatch of that Incineroar on Yoel's end here. So I like the Protect on this Raging Bolt, keeping itself safe from that Porygon 2.
Yes, and Porygon 2 looking to go for the Ice Beam there into the Electric Dragon. That definitely would have hurt a little bit, as the Incineroar just, again, goes for another parting shot. There really isn't this kind of urgency to deal damage at this point. It's just about trying to get rid of this Porygon 2. The Incineroar, once again, on Yoel's side, I don't know how it's hanging on so long, but it's definitely not giving up the fight. The burn is going to come through and will be able to get the knockout, however. So it's definitely put in a lot of work for its trainer, but it comes down to this Porygon 2. You mentioned earlier that you don't think the opponent has the capability to get through it, and looking that it's actually managed to take down 2 Pokemon, it's now in a 1v2 rather than a 1v4, which was potentially the situation. It's definitely giving itself a little bit of a run for the win here.
Yeah, it certainly is, but can it do it quick enough?
Yeah.
Because honestly, the time is ticking down of this match. So when the time of this game runs out, like with 2 Pokemon, Joan will technically win this game. So Porygon 2 needs to get its little feet on and start taking KOs.
You have to worry about the Flare Blitzers as well, because they do recoil damage. That's something you don't want to take either. The Thunderbolt's coming through, and I'm kind of wondering, you know, why are we maybe not burning this Porygon 2 if you're Joan here? But at the same time, I think it's probably better to try and get a paralysis with something like the Thunderbolt, just to be able to try and stop it from going from these recovers. A burn at the end of the day isn't going to affect it. It's a special attacker, and it can recover away the damage anyway. Another Ice Beam coming through, and another Protect. Really wise, calm plays coming through from Joan here, but it's going to be a Will-O-Wisp coming through, so actually maybe thinking, I don't want to go for the risk. I'm going to risk that Will-O-Wisp will hit, but I'm able to get the damage down here and just start chipping away a little bit at Porygon 2.
Yeah, you called it, Lou. Yeah, the Will-O-Wisp is definitely a really good play here. So regardless of where this Porygon 2 targets or keeps itself safe, that Will-O-Wisp burn chip is definitely going to add up later on to this game. So the question is, how much does the Ice Beam do to Raging Bolt? Not a lot, honestly. That at least needs another 3 to go. Flare Blitz comes up, putting his Porygon 2 a little bit closer to a KO.
Yes, this Porygon 2 is having a lot of attacks battering down on it at this point. You can see there's only 2 minutes left in this match. It definitely is going to be a race to that finish line. And Porygon 2, considering that it didn't go for the recover on this turn and Trick Room has now ended, it looks like it could be curtains for the Porygon 2.
Yeah, there it is. Yeah, that last electric cyber attack to take down that Porygon 2. And Joan Poyato takes the round 4 of the Utrecht special event so convincingly.
A valiant effort from the Porygon 2, but it wasn't enough. Joan able to take the victory, and